Hello, everyone, and welcome to a live episode of Sports Daily College Basketball. It's episode 132. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I'm here with Joe Meade tonight, and Joe and I are just hopping on to get to a couple of recaps here of the early action. It is currently 8:06 p.m. Eastern. There are four pretty solid games going on right now, so hang in there with us if you're not watching this live. The first game of the day was TCU and Ohio State. Joe, is there an echo coming through? Sorry.
No, there's no echo.
Okay. All right. Well, TCU and Ohio State started the first game. The Horned Frogs win 66-64, but that does not tell the story. TCU jumps out to a big lead at halftime, 15 points. They blow that lead. Ohio State takes I think 5-point lead at some point in the second half, and then they're able to finish the job. It's Xavier Edmonds who hits the layup inside with a couple of seconds remaining, and then Ohio State has 3 or 4 seconds left at the end to put up a game winner. They don't get a very good look. But Joe, we both thought Ohio State, or I thought Ohio State was going to win. You thought TCU was going to win. What went on here in your opinion?
I think TCU was pretty lucky the way they played the second half. I know, the Cardinal rules, you can't fall down 15 in an NCAA tournament game, but I thought Ohio State coming out of the break, that's how they should have attacked them the whole time. I know, Jamie Dixon defenses are very difficult to play against, and that they're so physical, like all around, compared to what Ohio State saw in the Big Ten. They even asked Bill Rafferty on the broadcast, are any Big Ten teams this crazy about it on defense? And Raf said no. It's usually down low. I think Ohio State felt like the first 10 minutes, every other possession was a turnover. So I thought that was pretty disappointing for the Buckeyes. Another thing that Jamie Dixon did, I know a lot of people have given Bruce Thornton a lot of flack for his overall game. I think he did a really good job trying to make other people beat him. Clearly, he flirted with fire with the great game John Mobley Jr. had. I thought some of their closeouts and their inability to run him off the three line, which isn't really an insult because no one in the Big Ten had consistent success doing that, wasn't great. But it was really the committee of scores. That's the difference in this game to me, Sean. TCU has 3 to 4 guys in double digits. I think Brock Harding also had, just pulling up the stat line here.
8.
Yeah, I believe he only had 8, but I think he affected the game in so many other ways. Assist wise, defensively, took brutal, that brutal blocking foul toward the end of the game. And that's kind of why TCU won this game. I thought they overused the three at times. And when they got it down low to punch and utilize Edmonds in the correct way, that's when TCU took the lead back and would really allow them to extend that lead.
Yeah, they were able to get a lead in the first half. They ended up leading by 15 because they hit 7 threes in the first half, and they were outside the top 300 and three-pointers going into this. So I think it was definitely not fair to expect them to do what they did in the first half again, but it was their defense that gave them enough of a lead. If let's say they're up by 6 at halftime, Joe, they probably don't win this basketball game, but you're up by 15, you're able to sustain that early punch and still be in the game. I thought their length clearly bothered the Buckeyes. They were, looking at the refs for some calls, and they didn't really ever come. Now, I think they did impose their will a little bit better in the second half, but I don't think that Ohio State prepared for this game the right way. The story of the first half for me was TCU has Jamie Dixon and Ohio State has Jake Diebler, and that's why things are going. And I think there's no doubt that Ohio State has more talent on this roster, and it got them back in the game, but Mobley had a few good looks that would have been really timely that didn't go down, and they weren't able to do much outside of it. But, Punch had 2 fouls. He only played like 4 minutes in the first half, and they were still up by 14 or 15. Thought at that point it could get pretty ugly, but they didn't go down without a fight. But it is a pretty disappointing finish for Ohio State because I think a lot of people, including me, thought that they were the better team here. They just weren't really able to show it enough over the 40 minutes. So because of the victory, Joe, TCU will move on to face Duke, and boy, did it look like they were in some trouble for a little bit. They were scrolling up here. They played number 16 Siena out of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, and the Siena Saints brought it to them. They were up by 11 at halftime. They led by as much as 14 in the second half, but the legs for Siena go out a little bit, and Duke gets away with a 6 point victory. But what a close call this was for John Shire and the Blue Devils.
Yeah, Sean. I know a lot of people like to spotlight Cam Boozer, and rightfully so. I think Isaiah Evans really sparked this comeback in the second half. The first half, you kind of felt like I think everyone on this broadcast has felt a certain way when their team's been in a game or down to an underdog, where it's just like shot after shot. The lead grows from 5 to 11 to whatnot. But I give a lot of credit to Isaiah Evans. His energy in the second half, his dunking, and then Duke's in a bit like Duke capitalized off every turnover, every one-on-one run out they had, whether it was Cam Boozer, Caden Boozer, or Evans himself. They did a really good job converting on those, and I think that's what ultimately got them back in the game. Clearly, when you play Duke and Siena, no offense to Siena, 100 times out of 100, if it's a 3 point game, I still think Duke beats them if you have like 7 minutes left, and that's all Duke had to do. They just had to make it a ball game with enough time, and thankfully for the Blue Devils, they did that. So, not the greatest intensity I've ever seen from a one seed. I'm watching my Michigan team right now, kind of hanging in there with Howard. I think Michigan's intensity is not great, but Duke's uh as I believe it was who was getting interviewed at halftime. It was Malik Brown at halftime, and Tracy Wolfson said,
Yeah,
"Yeah, we didn't really turn it on for this game." A, I don't know why he would say that.
yeah.
B, I guess good for him for telling the truth, but it clearly didn't have to be said. It was pretty damn obvious from the beginning. So. Duke got away with one. I certainly think, based on watching TCU after seeing my team play them and watching them in the Big 12 all year, having that kind of carelessness and whatnot, even though TCU went through a dry spout against Ohio State, don't think I would recommend the Blue Devils doing that against a Jamie Dixon coach team. Absolutely not.
This to me, and those player interviews, Joe, that you mentioned, they're coming out of the locker room at halftime, and I think what he meant to say was like Shire told us to stop doing that. Not that they necessarily were going into the game, but yeah, that wasn't a good look. And you know, if Siena didn't have like a serious personnel problem going into this game, I think they probably win this basketball game. They have basically played five players for the last month. They've had some injuries. They've had a player deemed ineligible. Obviously, I do watch Siena more than just about everybody, with them being in the MAC with my team Fairfield, but um, they just came to play. I thought Jerry McNamara was a much better coach than John Shire in this one. They ran good stuff. They got good shots. And Joe, at the end of the day, like Siena was 38% from the field in this game. If they didn't have some great game where they hit 15 threes and shot 60% from downtown, this was a average game for them offensively. Now they're not going up against Duke every game, so maybe it's a little bit adjusted. But and when John Shire went to zone against this Siena team, what is he thinking? But luckily, he had enough talent to get over the hump there. So it'll be Duke versus TCU on Saturday. I don't believe we have times for those yet, but let's go over to I believe was the second game to tip. It was the Buffalo site. It was Pat Kelsey in Louisville going up against USF and Brian Hodgson. And this game, I guess, lived up to the hype. It looked like it was going to be a very big Louisville victory for most of it. USF has a couple of pushes late. They ultimately just run out of time. They lose by 4, but Pat Kelsey and Louisville get that elusive NCAA tournament win. That is his first tournament win ever, actually, as a coach, Pat Kelsey. And it comes at the hands of Isaac McNeely, who hit 7 triples. Joe, did this game go the way that you thought it would, or if it didn't, how?
No, I actually did pick Louisville in this game. A lot of people, I think this is one of the more popular upsets in general. Certainly the most picked 11/6 game. But I think Louisville's style of play, even without Mikhail Brown, notably, it doesn't really change. He's not I guess, the ride or die for
Yeah.
this team. The way, like, for Big Ten people, if Jeremy Fears is out for MSU or Donovan Dent, as you saw for UCLA late in that Big Ten tournament, when those guys are out and not playing, makes a huge difference. But
Yeah,
I
the
think
Louisville
Louisville,
system is built to, they have obviously rather have him back, but they could withstand it. They actually played pretty solid today, I think.
yeah, I think Isaac McNeely and Ryan Conwell, people forget those are two pretty damn good basketball players as well. Don't think much else was great. I think Sanaja Fru also had a great game, but I think Louisville was just, we've seen at times, the first time they played Duke at Louisville, they get out to these big leads, and I know they kind of squandered it toward the end, but getting out to those leads, as you saw in
Yeah.
the Siena game, as you saw in the TCU game, that really matters when you don't see a team all the time. Certainly, Louisville and South Florida haven't seen each other this year. So it takes quite a while for the coaches to feel each other out. In Big Ten play or in conference play, I should say, you see these teams pretty regularly, and assuming there's no new coach or whatever, you see him, you know, 3 to 4 times within a 2 year span. So chances are you're going to get pretty familiar. I think it took South Florida a little too long. I don't necessarily think they played bad at all overall. It's just they dug themselves way too deep a hole in the first half. And I think it's a shame because if this game probably had 2 or 3 more minutes, this could have gotten real interesting. But Louisville, the winners, and I think deservedly so.
This was a game, Joe, where I think if you were to play it over and over and over again, I think it's pretty close to 5 out of 10 both ways without Mikael Brown. Like USF is a good 3 point shooting team. They went 5 of 33 in this game. Now I thought there were some tough ones forced at the end of the shot clock, but they got a ton of good looks that they didn't make. Um, you had um, you had Wes Enos, who is the one of the best shooters in the American Conference, go 0 for 11. Joe Pinion, 5 of 14. Like these are bucket getters. These guys, and if Brian Hodgson goes to a different school next year, he's probably going to bring Enos and Pinion as a senior. He's going to be playing pro ball somewhere. So I was a little bit disappointed with that because I thought USF really came to play in the physicality department. They just weren't able to make shots, and Louisville was. 13 threes compared to 5 on 8 less attempts. That's going to get you a really. It's going to be hard to overcome in the other two ways that you can score from the free throw line or from two. So Louisville gets away with one, and well, I don't know if they get away with one because I don't think they played poorly. They played pretty well, but I don't think that is good enough to beat a team that's better than them, like who they'll be facing in the next round, who we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I think Louisville's just one of those teams, Joe, where they're probably going to beat the teams that they're better than, and when a team as good as them or better than them comes into the court, they're probably going to lose.
Yeah. And I think Louisville, I don't know if they're going to get Mikael Brown back. I don't think it's very likely
It's
based
not
on what I
not
hear,
not
but
for the next game. Maybe a potential second weekend if they make it.
yeah, but the bottom line is we'll talk about Michigan State here, Sean, but I think this matchup could be pretty interesting, but probably we want to move on to the Spartans here.
Yeah, so we're going by sites. I think it's just
Yep.
easiest. Michigan State, North Dakota State from Buffalo. The Spartans win 92-67. It was a simple, Izzo takes care of business in the better spot situation. I mean, this game was over before you could even blink. There was a ton of games going final around when USF Louisville and the another game that we'll get to later was close too. So I kind of like missed the start of this game, and by the time I looked at it, Michigan State was already up 10, and it looked like it was going to be a quick one, which it ended up being. Carson Cooper gets a double double. Simply just Michigan State taking care of business here, and obviously the matchup with Louisville that you said, but really balanced attack from the Spartans. You have Jeremy Fears, who only has 7 points and 4 turnovers, and it's still a 25-point win. So I think a lot of things to be excited about for Michigan State.
Yeah, and I think it kind of answers there was a little uncertainty. Michigan State, after that loss to Wisconsin at the Kohl Center, really went on a roll there, including their loss at Michigan. I thought they played a lot of really good games. Disregard the Rutgers last like 2 minutes or whatever fiasco that almost was. But then they look really uninspired against UCLA in that first half. The second half, I personally defended the Spartans. I thought they played great in the second half and kind of just dug themselves too deep a hole. Like it's been a big theme in this discussion. Don't dig yourselves a hole. But today, just straight from the get go, I think North Dakota State had like their last lead was like at 7-6 or something ridiculous, and Michigan State just took flight from there. Cohen Carr, Jeremy Fears, Kohler Cooper. I mean, this is what a Michigan State victory looks like.
Yeah.
The moment you make mistakes, they jump on you. And luckily for the Spartans, they did that. I don't know why this was one of the more picked 14-over-3 upsets. Uh, Pretty silly to me. I really don't think Tom Izzo is going to get Middle Tennessee stated again. So Good on the Spartans. I'm really intrigued for this matchup with Louisville. Louisville style teams have given Michigan State a lot of problems this year. Certainly think Mikael Brown being out puts them at a disadvantage. But Sean, I think what it comes down to for Michigan State is this: when Jeremy Fears could get in the lane and dictate the offense and pace of play, Michigan State's really, really hard to beat. And barring barring being a Michigan talent wise or a Wisconsin shooting performance wise, it's been really tough to take down this team when their offense is in sync.
It's going to have to be sort of like a modern basketball overtakes the traditional game type for um for Michigan State, because like I said with Louisville, they haven't consistently competed against teams that are better than them. They're probably going to have to launch a lot of threes, and that's probably the best way to go about it because Michigan State's so physical inside. They wore down North Dakota State here. I think they can do that to Louisville too. But yeah, I was impressed with the business-like approach, and it really does, Joe. I don't want to get on a sidetrack here, but it really does, bring you back to that Middle Tennessee upset and how unexpected that was, because the Michigan State play style is not one that I'd want to go up against as a mid-major.
No.
But I know, things started to break their way. They got a huge lead in that game and never really looked back. But um, Michigan State advances to the round of 32 to play Louisville. All right, let's go back to, let's see. This is not in the right order because Nebraska played before Vanderbilt. Cornhuskers came into this one, Joe, looking for their first NCAA tournament win in program history, and they get it. It was one that a lot of people picked the upset for, but Nebraska takes a 16-point lead at halftime. They win by 13 in the second half as well. Price Sanford with 23, and Nebraska dominated them on the boards. Obviously an impressive win here for the Cornhuskers, and they got a little bit of program history to go along with it.
And Sean, what's funny, we're recording this at 8:30 Eastern time. I think Nebraska had by margin, them and Michigan State had the biggest wins, but Nebraska, this wasn't in doubt. Well, actually, Michigan State, they both thoroughly dominated. My point is, this game wasn't even close.
Yeah.
Nebraska didn't really, for your first NCAA tournament win, normally it's a little more dramatic, but this in the best way was not dramatic for the Huskers. I think Price Sanford, luckily his brother was there to see him too. 7 of 12 from three. When he has 12 looks, I'd be shocked if he didn't hit at least 4 or 5. He hit 7 today. Rick Mast, I thought, established himself down low against a way smaller and putier team, to be quite frank with you. And really just the energy, and that crowd was one of the most impressive crowds I've seen at NCAA tournament game. I think you would have to drive like 5 to 8 hours, depending on where in Nebraska or Iowa, where a lot of Nebraska fans do live, to get to Oklahoma City. So good on them. Good for Husker faithful. Fred Hoiberg, I think me and Sean have sung his praises for years now, even in their down years. Uh, Pretty special moment for the Huskers. Interesting matchup, I think, in their next round too.
I think they played a little differently in this game, Joe, than we have seen recently. They actually acted like a Big Ten team here. Like they imposed their will down low. They got on the boards. They forced a ton of tough shots from Troy. Troy only takes, if I'm doing my math correctly, 18 2-point field goals all game, and they go 5 for 18 on twos. Like that is not typically the Nebraska defense. And I thought a bunch of tough threes they forced too, and they had 14 twos and 14 threes. Like they took 19 more shots than the other team. They forced 17 turnovers. This was a very impressive performance from Nebraska. That in Big Ten games, I think they had sort of approached some of those games like a mid-major team would against a Big Ten team. We're going to shoot, we're going to space the floor, we're going to, speed you up, we're going to get you out of the paint. But they didn't do that here, and I think that was good because if you fall into the trap of playing the style that a mid-major team wants to play, some bad things can happen. And that brings us to our next game, Joe, which included a Big Ten team, and that's Wisconsin. The High Point Panthers out of North Carolina get the day's biggest upset. They win 83-82. Just a crazy, hectic, up and down game with tons of threes, tons of points, and it's Greg Gard that loses again early in the NCAA tournament. But what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we can dive into that narrative later. Sean, I think you look at a lot of Wisconsin victories. Nick Boyd usually plays well, John Blackwell, and I think they both did enough in this game.
Yeah.
I think the supporting cast has to do more. They had plenty of 7 to 10 point leads in this game, and they kind of all just went away. I think Wisconsin has to know, and they really should know because they've been doing it to the really good teams in the Big Ten. They did it to Michigan, they did it to Michigan State, they did it to Purdue, and they did it to Illinois. You have to run these teams off the line, and of course, it's easier said than done. But what really disappointed me in this game, Sean, is Wisconsin could never just slam the door. I think as many times as they've been down 8 to 10 points since January and come back, they've also let teams like back into games. And one thing I want to call out, 9 of 23 from three is fine at all. The shocking thing is High Point out rebounded them. Wisconsin's not the greatest rebounding team in the world, Sean, but in a lot of games they've won, or at least stayed in, like, the Michigan game in the Big Ten tournament, even, they allowed themselves to not get completely dominated on the boards. Today, they weren't dominated, but against the team where you have a height advantage and, frankly, let's just call it a talent advantage, athleticism advantage, whatever you want to call it, got to win the margins there. That's what I ultimately think did them in. They didn't get the extra shots. I think High Point shot 74 field goals. Wisconsin only shot 65. I think that's what ultimately did them in this game.
They when we previewed this game, Joe, I said I didn't think High Point had a chance because they are foolish enough to play the same play style as Wisconsin. Flip that around. Wisconsin was foolish for playing the High Point game. They went up and down. I thought Wisconsin obviously they scored 82 points on 80ish 75ish possessions. That's fine. You get both of your stars into the 20s. Blackwell did have 18 at halftime and just 4 in the second half, but like you said, they just weren't able to shake them. They had a couple of they have a missed layup or a missed dunk up 8 to go up 10 with 6 minutes left, and then High Point comes down the other end, shoots a 3, and then bang, it's 5 just like that when it was supposed to be 10. But I was impressed with High Point. I didn't think they'd be able to hang with Wisconsin in this play style, and they did. They only turned it over 6 times, playing a lot of hectic ball. And Chase Johnston off the bench, he is exclusively a 3-point shooter, and his layup with 4 seconds left was his first 2-point field goal of the season. So not a much better time to get that. He's only taken 4 twos all season before that shot, and they are all when his foot is on the line accidentally when trying to shoot a 3. So High Point picks off the upset. They will play Arkansas in the round of 32. It was a pretty clean Arkansas win, Joe. I don't think we have to go over that. And then Nebraska will play Vanderbilt, who let McNeese hang around for a little bit, but they I don't think they're ever going to lose that game. But them and Wisconsin were in similar spots with 5 to 6 minutes left. So other than that, Joe, I think those are all the games that have went final. Do you want to add anything on those before we? Well, none of these games are over yet. So yeah, do you want to add anything on those games?
The ones that are not final, or the ones that were
The
final?
ones that are final.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to contribute to the Greg Gard narrative. We're not going to go on a tirade about this now. The bottom line is he's lost three years in a row as a favored seed. The year before he missed the NCAA tournament. He should not be on the hot seat by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think you got to question their play style, right? It was really entertaining and clearly it was successful shot. They should have been a triple bye team in the Big Ten. They really fooled around in a lot of the games they lost. And you could say the same last year too, right? They get to the Big Ten, three Big Ten tournament finals and then the semifinal this year in a row. But it's just not enough to get them over the finish line. Is it an NIL problem? Is it a scheme problem? I think it's a bit of both. I think they probably need one more guy. Last year was John Todgy and Blackwell. This year was Nick Boyd and Blackwell. But Sean, nothing's guaranteed anymore. Is John Blackwell going to be around next year? Does he go to the NBA? Does he go to another team? Wisconsin. I think what's a shame is they've been eliminated the first weekend, but I don't think they're far away from being the consistent second weekend, Final Four perennial contender they were under Bo Ryan. So they just need one more step to figure that out. Unfortunately, it's just accentuated today.
Yeah, the play style it's a tough like way to go against their play style, Joe, with what we saw this year. You know, them winning a bunch of huge Big Ten games, but on the other hand, they did lose to worse teams than they beat for the most part, and some of them were not close at all. Like they lost by 30 to Nebraska. They got crushed at Ohio State. Like I think maybe there is a little bit of like flexibility needed for this Wisconsin team and their play style, but at the same time, Joe, that wasn't the problem today. They just played against somebody who was better at it than they were. And you can say that's a little bit unlucky with the matchup, but if you're sitting in the 5 to 6 range, which they have been over the years, that's how teams are going to play. You know, James Madison a couple of years ago, and they beat him at Madison Square Garden. Not a whole lot different. You had AJ Storr in that game. You had Johnny Davis when they lost as a 3 seed in the round of 32 to an 11 seed Iowa State. You had Nick Boyd and John Blackwell in this game, and you still weren't able to get over the hump. So I think,
Yeah, John Tachi last year too against BYU, and that's a
yeah.
game they should have won as well.
So I think you really do have to, if you're Wisconsin, you have to keep putting yourself in that opportunity. In terms of transfer destination, Joe, I think Greg Gard's got a pretty good selling point. He's like, look at Nick Boyd 1 year, look at John Tanji 1 year. You know, I think they could bring in somebody to be the best player on the team next year, even if it's not John Blackwell. But yeah, disappointing. We'll get to a state of the program episode for Wisconsin eventually, and we can go into that more. But it was disappointing today, Joe, because you know Ohio State loses a toss-up game. Michigan State, Nebraska win. 90 to 10,
Convincingly, yeah.
90 to 10 games that they really should have won. But this is the one that the league should have had, but it didn't. So we have 4 games here that are going on. We're not. I mean, look, the games could end way differently than they are now. So, Joe, unless you got anything else to add, I think we'll wrap it up here.
A good first session. Looking forward to the second session tonight.
So, no idea when we will be back next. At the very minimum, probably this time tomorrow. But we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.